He kissed me goodbye, then kissed her hello. My husband thought I'd never find out about the babysitter. But I didn't just find out, I made sure everyone else did too. This is a story about betrayal, broken trust, and the sweetest revenge I've ever pulled off. If you've ever been lied to, cheated on, or underestimated, you're going to feel this one in your bones. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories of justice served, because sometimes karma just needs a little push. I always believed marriage was built on honesty, loyalty, and a shared dream. That's what I thought I had with Daniel. We'd been married for 8 years. We had a 4-year-old daughter, Lily, who was my entire world. And up until 1 year ago, I would have sworn on my life that Daniel was a good husband and father. He was charming, funny in a quiet sort of way. The guy who helped neighbors shovel snow in the winter and grilled burgers for the block party in the summer. People loved him. I loved him. At least, the version of him he let me see. But that's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't come from your enemies. It comes from the one person you trusted the most. I first noticed the cracks in our marriage when his office late nights started happening more often. At first, once or twice a month, then once a week, then sometimes 2, even 3 times a week. He'd walk in past midnight, reeking faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. I'd ask, "How was work?" And he'd sigh, roll his eyes, and say, "Stressful. Can we not talk about it?" I wanted to believe him. I chose to believe him because facing the alternative that my husband, the father of my child, was lying to me was too terrifying. We'd hired a babysitter around that time, a 19-year-old college student named Emily. She was bubbly, energetic, with that effortless youth that made you both admire and envy her. Lily adored her. She'd braid Lily's hair, paint her nails, play dress-up for hours. At first I was grateful. I needed help while juggling my part-time teaching job and house responsibilities. But slowly, I noticed the way Daniel's eyes lingered on her when she laughed. The way he'd conveniently come home early when he knew she was around. The way she smiled too brightly at his stupid dad jokes. My gut told me something was off, but love makes you doubt your instincts. So I pushed it down until one night, the truth slapped me across the face. It was a Thursday. I came home early from work, juggling Lily's art projects and a bag of groceries. I wasn't expecting Daniel home yet. His meeting supposedly went late. I opened the door to silence. Too much silence. I set the groceries down quietly. My ears picked up faint laughter, hushed voices coming from upstairs. My stomach sank. Slowly, I climbed the stairs. And there, outside the bedroom I'd once considered ours, I heard it. Her giggle, his voice, the unmistakable rhythm of betrayal. I froze. For a full minute, I couldn't breathe. My knees trembled. The weight of the moment pressed into my chest like 1,000 pounds. I didn't storm and I didn't scream. Instead, I walked back down the stairs as quietly as I'd come up. I left the groceries, left the house, and sat in my car, staring at the steering wheel with tears streaming down my face. In that moment, I died. Not physically, but the version of me that believed in him, in us, in marriage. That Sarah was gone. But another Sarah was born, one who would not be humiliated, one who would not be discarded like trash, one who would take her time, sharpen her blade, and make sure when the truth came out, it burned. And oh, would it burn. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, while Daniel's steady breathing beside me mocked my every thought. How could he just drift into sleep, knowing what he had done? How could he lie next to me, knowing he'd just betrayed everything we built? Every tick of the clock was a hammer inside my head. I kept replaying it, the giggle, his low whisper, the creak of our bed. My imagination painted every horrible detail. My stomach churned until I ran to the bathroom and vomited. When I came back, he stirred, half asleep, and muttered, "You okay, babe?" I wanted to strangle him. Instead, I whispered, "Yeah, just a stomach thing." He kissed my forehead. I wanted to scrub my skin raw. For days, I lived like a ghost. I smiled when Lily was around. I cooked dinner. I folded laundry. On the outside, life looked normal. But inside, I was rotting. Every interaction with him felt like poison. His phone buzzing during dinner. His vague answers about work. His stupid, guilty smile when Emily stopped by to pick up something she left. I started noticing patterns. Emily's shifts always seemed to stretch longer when Daniel was working late. Her college classes, supposedly rigid, magically left her free whenever he was. They thought they were clever, but love makes cheaters sloppy. One evening, I finally tested him. He walked in late, shirt untucked, smelling faintly of vanilla body spray, the exact kind Emily always wore. I said casually, "You smell nice." "New cologne." He blinked, froze for a fraction of a second, then forced a laugh. "Oh, must have been the air freshener in the car." I nodded. "Right, air freshener." My blood boiled, but I stayed calm. That became my life, testing him, gathering evidence in my head, watching him lie with ease. Every day was a war inside me. The urge to confront him versus the need to bide my time. But the toll was real. I lost weight without trying. Food had no taste. I'd catch myself staring blankly at Lily, realizing minutes had passed without me even noticing her little voice calling, "Mommy." One night, I finally broke. I sat on the bathroom floor, knees pulled to my chest, sobbing into a towel so no one could hear. I wanted to scream, to smash something, to tear the walls down. Instead, I whispered to myself over and over, "You're not crazy. You're not crazy. You know what you heard." That's when the doubt crept in. What if I had imagined it? What if I misheard? What if I was wrong? Daniel was charming. Remember, he knew how to twist words, how to smile just enough to make you question your reality. Gaslighting wasn't new to him. A week later, he gave me a perfect example. We were sitting on the couch, Lily tucked into bed. I asked casually, "How's work been?" "You've been out late a lot," he sighed, exaggerated, as if I was the problem. "Sarah, we've talked about this. The new project is killing me. I'm exhausted. Can you not add to my stress?" I wanted to scream, "You're sleeping with the babysitter, you lying bastard." But instead, I bit my tongue until I tasted blood. That night, he rolled over and fell asleep instantly, leaving me wide awake again. My heart thudded like a drum. That was the moment I decided I would stop doubting. I would stop begging for truth from a liar. I would start collecting. I bought a small voice-activated recorder online, harmless looking, easy to hide. The first time I set it up, my hands shook so badly, I almost dropped it. I tucked it behind a stack of books on the living room shelf, angled toward the couch. Then I left, took Lily out for ice cream, pretending it was a spontaneous mommy-daughter treat. When we came back, Daniel was gone. A note on the counter, "Went for a run." My heart pounded as I retrieved the recorder. That night, when he fell asleep, I crept into the bathroom, earbuds in, and pressed play. Static, silence. Then voices. Emily's laugh, Daniel's low tone. Her, "She doesn't suspect, right?" Him, chuckling, "Sarah, she's too trusting. She'd never believe it." I stopped breathing. Then her voice, "Coy, you're bad." His reply, "Smug, only with you." My hands trembled so violently the recorder nearly slipped from my fingers. I stopped the playback before I could hear more. That was enough. Proof. But proof didn't stop the pain. If anything, it deepened it. Now I wasn't just suspicious. I knew, and knowing meant living every day with a knife lodged in my chest. I became paranoid. Every smile from Emily felt like mockery. Every kiss from Daniel felt like poison. I wanted to scream at both of them, but I swallowed it, day after day, until the pressure built like a volcano. One night, lying awake, I whispered to myself, I could leave, file for divorce, take Lily and go. But another voice inside me, darker, stronger, said, "No, not yet. They don't just get to walk away. They don't get to destroy you in secret. They need to be exposed. They need to be burned." That's when the idea of revenge first took root. But revenge doesn't come easy. Over the next few weeks, I lived in a split reality. On the surface, I played the dutiful wife, smiled at neighbors, hosted a family dinner, even hugged Emily at the door once, forcing my arms not to crush her throat. Inside, I was sharpening knives. I bought 2 more recorders, hid one in the kitchen, another in our bedroom. Every day, I collected snippets, their laughter, their whispers, little fragments that, when pieced together, painted the ugliest picture of all. But I still had doubts. Would anyone believe me? Daniel was everyone's favorite guy. Emily was young, sweet, the babysitter everyone wished they had. I'd look like the bitter, paranoid wife. I needed a stage, a spotlight, a moment so undeniable it would crush them both at once. That's when fate handed me the perfect opportunity. Daniel's birthday was coming up. He wanted a big party, friends, family, co-workers, a night all about him. And I smiled, nodded, and said, "Of course, honey, let's make it unforgettable." Oh, it would be unforgettable, just not in the way he thought. When I said yes to the birthday party, It felt like the simplest lie of all. Of course, honey, whatever you want. I had practiced that smile in the mirror until it looked real. I scheduled florists, ordered a cake, answered texts from his friends with a kind of cheerfulness that could have convinced a saint. People told me I was a great hostess. They didn't know I was sowing the stage where his life would unravel. For a long time after the discovery, my world had been two colors, the cold gray of betrayal and the sharp, hot red of fury. But planning the revenge painted 1,000 shades in between: calm, rational, meticulous, sometimes almost gentle. That was the trick. True retribution has no theatrics. It's quiet, it's precise. It is the art of letting someone believe they are still in control, right up until the moment they are not. I started with logistics. If you're going to expose someone, you need an audience that matters. Daniel's parents were coming, his sister, work friends, the kind of people who'd tell other people, the kind of people who'd carry gossip like wildfire. Perfect. The party would be in our backyard, under the strings of warm, yellow lights he loved so much. We would invite the people who knew him as the good man. That contrast, public adoration and private betrayal, would make the downfall delicious. Next came the recordings. I already had 3, but I needed something larger, something undeniable that couldn't be dismissed as selective editing or a malicious out-of-a-context clip. I wanted a moment where his voice, his own words, would hang in the air like a noose. I considered the obvious: play the recordings and confront him privately. That felt small. I wanted him to feel the collapse, not crawl away and hide. I wanted to watch the face he showed to the world melt in front of those who bolstered him. So the recordings would be the centerpiece, played publicly, at his own party, when he was least prepared. But how to pull that off without looking like a lunatic or a vengeful ex-wife staging a scene? The answer was to craft a narrative so seamless no one could say it was a trap. I needed context-proof threads that built into a truth, a montage, a timeline, little things that painted a bigger picture when stitched together. I began to build that tapestry. First, I cataloged everything: dates, times, places, instances where Daniel had lied, tiny inconsistencies in his alibis, the nights Emily said she was studying but left at odd hours, the receipts. I found the lunch Daniel claimed was with a client, but was actually a latte bought near our old neighborhood where Emily's college was. I printed emails, text messages, screenshots. I wrote them out on index cards like a detective constructing a case. There was a cruel beauty in the method. I loved details suddenly because they were weapons. Daniel's station wagon had a dent on the passenger door that matched the bent corner of a receipt Emily once showed me. Small things that, when you looked at them together, became a constellation you couldn't ignore. Then there were the voices. I took those shaky recordings and did something both petty and methodical. I had them professionally cleaned. I am not proud of this. There is a certain permanence to proof when it's polished. I paid someone anonymously through a friend who worked in audio engineering to remove background noise, to flatten the volume spikes, to make each whisper crisp and undeniable. I wanted Emily's laugh to be as clear as a bell. I wanted Daniel's voice to be unmistakably his. There was also a risk. If anyone suspected anything before the party, everything would fall apart. So secrecy was paramount. I stopped using the family calendar for anything that might hint at my plan. I told Lily we were baking cookies for Daddy's party so she wouldn't be suspicious when I took videos with my phone of party prep. I even threw a few decoy moves. I booked a small photo session for the family the week before, ostensibly to have nice pictures for the party, that allowed me to walk upstairs with a camera, ostensibly to take photos, while setting small, hidden devices in places I couldn't reach otherwise. I learned the art of patience. Revenge thrives in those who have the capacity to wait. Of course, there were close calls. 1,000 times I felt like I was writing a thriller, where I was both the protagonist and the fool. Once, Daniel nearly walked in on me while I was moving a recorder from behind the bookshelf in our bedroom. I froze like a deer in headlights. He opened the door, rubbing his eyes, and said, "You okay? You've been weird." My voice was steady to steady and I said, "Just thinking about the party. So much to do." He nodded and left. He never suspected. The adrenaline after he shut the door was so sharp I thought it would split me in two. Another time, Emily texted me late at night, a small, jaunty message. "Can't wait for the party." Lily's so cute smiley face, and for a moment I wanted to explode her phone into 1,000 pieces. Instead, I kept breathing. I archived the text. I saved it. I photocopied receipts. People asked me how I didn't just confront her. or drag her onto the porch and scream until the neighbors peered out their windows. The truth, cold as it sounds, is that confrontation would have been therapy for me, not justice. I wanted more than a fight in the dark. I wanted the light. I started rehearsing the reveal in my head, sitting in my car in the driveway after dropping Lily off at school, whispering the cadence of a public announcement like an actor practicing a monologue. Ladies and gentlemen, the rehearsals were strange. I felt ridiculous and powerful in equal measure. I practiced the slow build, play a clip, let the murmur rise, then play another, and another, each one like dropping a pebble into a pond, until the ripples became a tidal wave. At night, when the house slept, I would stand at the window and watch Daniel in the living room, laughing too loud at something on TV, and remind myself why I'd chosen this. My anger was not just about being cheated on. It was about the erosion of my dignity, the theft of my family, the way he treated our life like a disposable commodity. That was why the party had to be public. He'd worn his charm like armor. It had to be taken off in front of those he used it on. The dressing of my plan required allies. I couldn't involve many. Trust was fragile and easily broken, so I chose with surgical precision. The audio engineer was one. A friend from work, Maria, who owed me a favor, agreed to be my confidant and diversion. On the night of the party, I told her just enough to make her useful. If anyone tries to stop the music or change the playlist, block them. Trust me, she did not pry. I paid her in coffee and silence. Then came the trickiest part. Timing. I needed a moment where Daniel would be at the center of attention, when he'd be vulnerable. His birthday cake, naturally, was that moment. People sing. They toast. Attention focuses like a spotlight. That's where the recording would play. But how to get a recording to play over party speakers without someone noticing? That required another secretive maneuver. I bought a small Bluetooth transmitter disguised as a USB thumb drive. It looked innocuous, the kind of thing you'd bring a playlist on. I set up a playlist under the guise of Daniel's faves. In reality, the playlist was my weapon. It began with classic, feel-good songs, something to lull everyone into cheerful complacency. Towards the middle, the tracks were interrupted by short, unassuming audio clips, the recordings I had cleaned and collated. Each clip started like it belonged on the playlist. Low volume, like a spoken word interlude. Then, the voice rose. The device was synced to the party speakers. The plan was elegant in its cruelty. During the cake cutting, someone would call for a toast. The DJ, who was actually my cousin, and in on the plan, would cue Daniel's faves. The playlist would play, the music would swell. And then, just as everyone clapped and sang, Emily's laugh would cut through the speakers. I thought about the phrasing of the clips. The first was a whisper between them, jeeringly intimate. She'd never believe it, right? The second was him saying, "You know, we have to be careful." The third was the one I wanted everyone to hear. Daniel's own admissions, his voice saying things like, "I can't stop thinking about you, and we'll figure out a way," was the kind of language you never expect from your partner when your entire life is built on his promises. I rehearsed different contingencies. What if someone cut the music? What if Daniel left? What if Lily started crying? Maria would keep Lily distracted in the kitchen with coloring pages. My cousin would control the music. My phone, hidden in my clutch, would have a backup recording ready to stream in case the Bluetooth failed. I thought about every permutation until I felt coldly confident. But plotting revenge is not just about technical preparation. There were moments of unlikely tenderness that complicated me. One night, while arranging table settings, Daniel walked in carrying Lily on his shoulders. He looked at the backyard lights, at the balloons I'd tied, and said, "You did good with this." His voice had that soft quality that used to make my knees weak. For a second, the old Saratha one who wanted to believe in him peered out. I felt a strange, sickening regret. I thought, are you doing the right thing? Is this cruelty necessary? That question would come and go like a tide. For a few hours, I considered tearing up the plan and walking away. Then he'd kiss me on the cheek, and in that small contact, I'd feel the thousand knives again. The resolve returned like a sharpened blade. There were also practical, ugly choices to make. What about Lily? The night would be messy. She would be present, and I had to protect her. I arranged for Lily to be involved in the pre-song activities, blowing out a small candle on a separate cupcake. Barefoot and laughing, unaware of the storm, Maria would shepherd her away at the moment the recordings began, taking her to the kitchen with juice and cookies, a perfect distraction. On the morning of the party, I felt a pressure behind my eyes like a heavy fog. I moved through my day performing minor domestic miracles, folding napkins, aligning silverware, smoothing the sash on Lily's dress while internally running long loops of the evening's sequence. I checked the Bluetooth device 3 times. I double-checked the recordings. I reaffirmed Maria's role. I texted my cousin a short message. Now, when guests started arriving, they were all smiles and compliments. People praised the lights, the food, how warm our home felt. Daniel basked in the glow like a sun chaser. He hugged friends, told that embarrassing college story that always got laughs, posed for photos. He looked every part the man I once loved, charming, handsome, beloved. And that was the cruelest part, the way people adored him. He had built a reputation that would make his fall spectacular. As the night wore on, I felt the adrenaline smooth into a steady hum. My hands didn't tremble anymore. I moved with purpose, like an actress hitting marks on stage. Lily ran around in her little dress, trailed by cousins and friends. I smiled when people complimented her. I swallowed bile when Daniel bought her a balloon and placed it in her hand. At the signal, a slight nod from my cousin while he adjusted the speakers. I lifted my glass. Everyone looked over at me because I was the wife, and it was polite to listen. The backyard light made the drink in my hand shimmer. My breath caught, but I found my voice. "I'd like to say something," I began, my voice steady, the rehearsed cadence falling into place naturally. People quieted. The murmurs softened. Daniel looked at me "This is it," I thought. "This is when the curtains part." I raised my glass and smiled, the smile of someone who had kept a secret for too long. "To Daniel," I said, "happy birthday." They clapped. Someone sang the birthday line off-key. The DJ Mike Cousin hit play on Daniel's faves. The playlist began perfectly. A familiar soft rock song swelling through the speakers. People sang along. Lily clapped. Daniel's shoulders relaxed, and he mouthed the words to the chorus. Then, like a knife through fabric, Emily's laugh echoed from the speakers. It was bright and unmistakable, the exact laugh from the recording that once hollowed me out. Heads turned, smiles froze. A whispering wave had already started. "What was that?" someone asked. Daniel's face shifted from delight to confusion. My heart hammered, but my voice remained cool. I let the sound hang for a second, just enough for unease to spread. The DJ, in on the plan, didn't change the song. Instead, the recording continued. Another clip played Daniel's voice, low and private, saying something I had heard 1,000 times in the privacy of my car but never expected to hear aloud. "We'll be careful. Don't worry about her." I watched the faces in the crowd change. At first, disbelief, then, slowly, comprehension, as the fragments stitched together in their minds. Daniel's smile thinned. He looked around as if searching for a hidden camera. "Turn it off," he hissed. A panic threaded through the command, but the playlist didn't stop. The next clip cut through, and by then the murmurs had become a chorus. I have never wanted anything more than I wanted to see that moment when his public mask would crack. And yet, as the third clip began to play, the impossible happened. Emily, standing by the punch bowl with a plastic cup in her hand, looked at Daniel with raw panic and started to walk toward the speakers. For a split second, I thought we had miscalculated. She crossed the lawn faster than I'd expected, hair whipping, face pale. Her lips were moving, but I couldn't hear what she was saying over the recording. Daniel lunged. He moved towards her like a man trying to catch a train that was already gone. "Don't," he shouted. "Don't." He grabbed for the device, his fingers knocking into the small USB transmitter. The moment his hand touched it, my cousin saw his chance and hit the encore switch on. Extra layer of audio that would keep the speakers playing. The backup from my phone. My mouth went dry. I realized the night could still collapse into chaos. People could try to physically stop the device. Someone could unplug everything. Someone could take my daughter and run. The contingencies I'd planned were suddenly more fragile than I'd imagined. I kept my glass raised as if nothing had happened. The background noise swelled, voices, the scrape of a chair, Lily's laugh somewhere at the edge of the scene end. For a minute I felt the full weight of what I'd orchestrated. This wasn't just about humiliation. It was a scalpel cutting through the lie of my life. Then, surprisingly, a small, bright sound cut through my cousin's phone, the backup stream, taking over. Emily reached the speakers and swatted at the device, her fingernails scraping plastic. Daniel's hand smacked her wrist and she yelped. The crowd gasped. Someone screamed, "Is she okay?" Another voice, "What the hell is going on?" I realized then that I had a choice. Step forward and seize control of the narrative. or let the confusion scatter everything. The weight of hundreds of eyes bore into me. I set my glass down with deliberate calm. "Listen," I said, and it was as if someone had turned the volume down on the world. My voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Everyone, please." I moved toward the speakers, each step deliberate. Daniel's glare locked on me like a physical blow. He reached for me as if to pull me back, but Maria, who had been shepherding Lily, intercepted him with a firm hand. "Let her speak," Maria said softly, and that moment of solidarity steadied me. I reached the speaker, put my hand on the small box, and hit pause on the playback. The sudden silence was like plunging into cold water. People blinked. The air hummed with the electric shock of anticipation. Then I pressed play on my phone. The clips began again, clearer this time because they were no longer muffled by the playlist's music. Each one landed like evidence dropped on a table. Faces changed from confusion to horror. Daniel's jaw clenched. Emily's face paled as if she'd seen a ghost. My chest fluttered not with fear but with the sickly headiness of someone who has been holding their breath for too long, finally exhaling. And with that, the stage was set. I could hear the rustle of conversations picking up like insects in summer. Someone called out, "Is this what?" My father-in-law's voice, incredulous. "Daniel, is this true?" Daniel opened his mouth, but I had rehearsed an answer for him. I turned to the crowd, the people who had kept him on a pedestal, and I began to speak. "You all know Daniel as the man who's always been kind, right? The one who helps neighbors, who takes Lily to soccer, who tells bad jokes at barbecue." Me too. I loved that man. I trusted that man, but he's been living two lives. My voice was steady, not shrill, and tonight, you're going to hear him say that himself. At that sentence, heads turned sharper. Daniel's fingers dug into my sleeve. He hissed, "Stop this." His voice was small. I swallowed the urge to tear him apart there and then. Instead, I smiled through the grief. "You'll hear everything, not my version, but his." I felt the air change, 1,000 small shifts, as people moved from curiosity to moral outrage. The recordings waited like sleeping dogs ready to be unleashed. As I pressed play on the next clip, I realized something terrifying and intoxicating at once. There was no going back. And just as the clip began, a sudden crash came from the back gate, a sound like something heavy hitting wood. Heads snapped toward the noise. Someone shouted. The moment broke like a dropped plate. And in that split second, Daniel lunged for the phone in my hand. The crowd surged. The night split in two, before and after. The gate crashing echoed like a gunshot. For a second, the world narrowed to a throat-clenching, frozen tableau. My phone in Daniel's hand, the recording blinking like a guilty heartbeat on the screen, and the crowd, our friends, our family, surging, as if pulled by some collective animal instinct. Daniel's fingers closed around my phone. I felt the pressure through my skin, familiar, intimate the touch of the man who had once held my hand with gentler intent. He twisted, breath burrowing shallow and hot into my face. "Give it back," he hissed, and it was the strangest bark of command. A man trying to reclaim something with force instead of honesty. People pushed in. Maria's hand was on my elbow like a brace. Someone shouted, "What's happening? Is someone there?" The backyard dissolved into a moving, murmuring tide. Lily, bewildered, glanced up at me with huge, trusting eyes. My heart did a ridiculous, traitorous thing. Skipped a beat, not for the panic, but because my daughter was looking at me, as if I were the safe harbor. I could have pulled the phone back. I could have shouted, "Stop him." But some part of me watched in slow, almost clinical observation. Daniel's face was contorting. The public masked, cracking into a flurry of small, ugly gestures. His jaw worked like he was trying to make words fit in a mouth that suddenly felt foreign to him. He had always been fast with defense, smile, joke, deflect, but speed hadn't helped him now. The audio was out there. The clips were still circulating in the air, like spectral witnesses. A towering neighbor Mark stepped between us and commanded, "Hey, calm down." He was the sort of man who liked to fix things. Daniel didn't listen. He shoved Mark aside with a quick, reckless shove, not violent enough to topple but heavy with intention. People gasped. Emily, who had moved toward the speakers, now stood close to Daniel. Fear painted her features in a way shame never had. She wasn't the bold, coquettish girl from the recordings anymore. She was small, scrambling for purchase on a slope she'd never intended to climb. "Daniel," she whispered, as if pleading could stitch him back together. That's when I did the only thing I truly had planned for, in case of chaos. I walked forward, not to wrestle the phone, not to attack, but to speak. My voice cut through the noise because I had practiced exactly what to say. I wasn't yelling. I was measured, legal, almost. People quieted because they could feel the authority that comes from someone who has been wronged and has concrete proof. Everyone, please, I said. This isn't a fight. These are recordings. You heard them. I'm going to play them from start to finish. If anyone wants to leave, please do. But I need this to be heard. Daniel's grip tightened on the phone like he was strangling the sound out of it. He turned on me, eyes hot. You can't do this. You'll make a scene, his voice pitched. It landed on conceptless anger instead of reason. I looked at him and felt something I hadn't allowed myself in months, an absolute, cold contempt. You already made a scene, I said softly. You made it in our bed. You made it in our house. Now you'll make it in front of everyone who believed in you. The words were my armor. They landed with a weight that pulled the chatter from the crowd like a tide. My father-in-law, once the portrait of bemused pride, walked toward Daniel with his hands wide, an old man who wanted answers more than he wanted to be right. Daniel, he said carefully, what is this? That simple question, the kind that asks for truth and not theatrics, felt sacred. Daniel sputtered. For a moment I saw the terrified boy I'd fallen in love with, hands flapping, eyes darting for escape. He took a step back. The phone was still clutched in his hand. The screen like a small, accusing altar. My cousin steady managed to wrestle the speaker controls back into a logical sequence, and the audio played again, this time with the clarity I'd paid for. The crowd leaned in. The first clip landed. A laugh, her voice bright and complicit. His whisper, then his admission. I can't stop thinking about you. The way people inhaled when that little sentence landed is something I will never forget. It sounded like the room took a collective gasp, as if everyone had been holding their breath without knowing it. The whispers started, then grew. Heads turned to Daniel, eyes wide, brows furrowing. His mouth worked, but the sound was thin and useless. My once husband, tried to explain himself, and his explanations were the pathetic flailing of guilt. It wasn't like that. It's complicated. He swung toward Emily in a motion that wanted her to take some of the blame. To make this a two-headed monster rather than his own betrayal. She started it, he said, a laugh like a broken thing. That line, that classic, instinctive deflection, didn't fly. No one bought it because everyone had just heard him say he couldn't stop thinking about her. That was the kind of candidness you don't manufacture in the moment. It carries an authenticity that pierced the defenses he'd thought built for him. People's faces hardened. Friend after friend stepped back. The warmth of the evening, the pleasant conversations, the easy laughter, those existed like a fragile postcard, now smeared by fingerprints of truth. Hearts that had been opened to him shuddered. Two of his co-workers who'd been talking up recruitment ideas moments before now looked at him as if they were viewing a stranger's scandalous headline. I saw my daughter's teacher, always polite, clench her jaw. I saw Daniel's sister put a hand over her mouth, trying to stop the flow of words that wanted to cascade. I watched my mother-in-law's face go pale. There was a tangible disillusionment there, like someone watching a beloved family photograph dissolve. Emily's lips trembled. She looked at me with something like pleading in her eyes. I felt a bitter surge. She had been the vessel for his betrayal, willing, naive, or complicit. But she was also young, scared, and now raw. There is a kind of pity reserved for those who have been used and then burned by the flame they courted. As the final clip faded, silence fell heavy and thick, like a cloth laid over a crime scene. The recordings had dismantled the facade, not with spectacle but with simple evidence. It was as if a jury had convened and the verdict hung in the balance. Daniel stumbled backward, his face drained of color. He straightened, trying to make his body taller, as if posture could correct moral collapse. In his eyes, I saw a dizzying mix of fear and a desperate attempt to self-preserve. Then came the briefest look, the kind that happens before someone finally understands. They are seeing their true reflection of pure regret. Regret that doesn't help anyone. He opened his mouth, but the words that came were hardly words. Sarah, he began, and I felt the room tilt in sympathy for him. Not because he deserved it, but because our culture tends to attend to masculine embarrassment with a softness strangers rarely afford the wronged. Father-in-law, who had always been a man of measured words, spoke up, low and steady. Daniel, is this true? He asked again. But now his voice held the tiredness of someone who had been lied to for a long time. Daniel's answer was small. Yes, the single syllable stabbed. There was no denial, no clever twist, just admission. It's hard to describe what comes after confession in a tight-knit crowd. a collapse of assumptions, a ripple of hurt, and then the pragmatic business of consequence. People began to file out in small groups, neighbors with murmured condolences, friends who had to reassess their loyalties. Some people walked straight up to Daniel and asked for explanations. Others, like his sister, held his hand and wept. The kind of public heartbreak that falls like rain over everyone is ugly and sanctifying in equal measure. There was shouting after that, someone calling him a liar, someone else telling Emily to get out, hurtful words shot like small knives. I didn't correct them. Hurt turned people cruel, and I had no interest in encouraging more harm. All I wanted was the truth to stand in the air between us, naked and undeniable. My mother-in-law came up to me then, eyes rimmed with tears, and took my hand with a kind of apology, not aimed at my face, but at the violation of whatever innocence she'd assigned to her son. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," she whispered. It was a small phrase, full of quiet complicity and decades of shared history. I could see the grief bend her shoulders. She stepped away slowly, not quite knowing where to stand. After the crowd thinned, the aftermath arrived like a second, heavier wave. People were still talking in hushed clusters, casting glances. The party lights that had looked once like constellations now felt like interrogation lamps. Someone started to gather the cake, wrapping plates in aluminum foil like funerary shrouds for a celebration that no longer belonged to anyone. Daniel, mute now to the point of staring, absently walked to the far end of the yard. He sat on the low stone wall, hands pressed together. The noise of the neighborhood made a soft, distant white sound. He looked older than his years, the smirk gone, the posture gone. He had nothing left but the echo of his own choices. I felt something break and reform in me that night. When the rush of public vindication hit, I had expected fireworks, some sort of triumphant shout or cathartic sob. Instead, I felt a complicated cascade. Relief, of course, like shaking water off your back. Shame for the family chaos, because even justified exposure causes collateral pain, and an unexpected, raw shame that my daughter had to be exposed to this. My heartbeat slowed to something almost mournful. Revenge, in that moment, tasted both sweet and terribly bitter. After the guests left, a small knot of close friends stayed. My cousin helped me gather plates while Maria sat with Lily on her lap, humming a silly tune. People brought warm casseroles and awkward condolences. They spoke of me as the wronged party and offered support, but there were also hushed, practical questions about divorce, custody, money. The business of unmaking a marriage had already crept into the room like a slow fog. Daniel and I didn't speak that night. We passed like ghosts through the detritus of our life: paper cups, half-eaten cake, a stray ribbon. The silence between us felt like a room with all the lights out, full of objects you know are there but can't see. The next morning, the reality hit in a new, prosaic way. There were messages on my phone, texts from friends, a flood of emails, and a half-dozen missed calls from numbers I recognized and didn't. My social life, such as it had been, had rearranged itself into a new topography of alliances. People who wanted distance wrote, "I'm so sorry, but I don't know what to say." Others, who had simmered with suspicion, sent short words of condolence and an offer to help find a lawyer. Daniel had disappeared. There was an empty space in our bed, and Lily asked, "Where's Daddy?" I answered with a quietness that felt like a new instrument in my voice. "He went for a long drive." It wasn't a lie so much as an evasion. She accepted it like children do, buoyed by the usual arc of parental absence. I felt my chest constrict. My daughter's world had been punctured. Somehow, my act of public justice had a personal cost that landed soft but real in her life. The weeks that followed were a reconstitution of identity. I called a lawyer because the house could not continue to be a battlefield without legal structure. The lawyer, sharp, brisk, talked about temporary custody, separation of finances, and the emotional toll these things take. I signed papers with hands that trembled and notched a date in my head like a scar. The day the marriage shifted from living to legal. There was fallout in the community that surprised me. Daniel's workplace put him on leave while HR looked into allegations. People texted about lighter things, but their tone was different, guarded, as if my family's drama was something contagious. For a while, grocery store clerks gave me apologetic smiles. A neighbor dropped off a casserole and admitted, "We didn't see this coming." Emily's life crumpled in ways that made me uncomfortable. She was young and had no safety net. Her college dropped her from tutoring because her reputation felt fragile. She left town shortly after, rumors trailing like loose threads. Did I feel remorse? a little, but she had been complicit in the deception. The moral weight of pity is not simple. It is a layered sentiment, soft in some places and sharp in others. There were consequences for me, too. Vindication doesn't erase the loss. Some friends rallied, others watched from the outside, unsure how to confront a person whose private life had become public. My in-laws were divided. My mother-in-law sent a letter apologizing for the pain, while parts of my father-in-law's side retreated into silence. There were angry accusations. Some people called what I'd done cruel, that I could have handled it differently. They argued that exposure in public was humiliating, that private betrayal should be settled quietly. Their voices made me consider the ethics of public revenge, but I had thought about ethics for a long time. In the quiet, sleepless nights, I'd replayed the options: confrontation, divorce, leaving, legal action. I'd considered police reports, therapy, mediation. What made me choose public exposure was not the hunger to humiliate, but the knowledge that people like Daniel, handsomely charming on the surface, could use social leverage to rewrite narratives. I wanted the truth to be anchored in the world so he could not gaslight his way out of consequence. I wanted a line drawn in the neighborhood's soil, a boundary others could point to and say, "Do not cross." One of the stranger consequences was how people would come to me afterward. Not always to take my side, but to share their own stories. A neighbor I'd known for 20 years admitted she had stayed in an abusive marriage because she felt too ashamed. A coworker I barely knew confessed she had been cheated on and never told anyone. There was a growing pattern of small confessions and wounded hearts. My action catalyzed conversations that had been dormant, and that felt like a kind of unintended moral good. Legally, things dragged. Divorce papers were filed. There were arguments about assets, custody, and therapist recommendations for Lily. We entered mediation. Daniel alternated between admissions and manic defensiveness in sessions, a jarring display of someone who had always used charm as camouflage. The legal process was mechanical and exhausting. It tightened around our private life like cold wire. There were moments of physical pain that surprised me. I'd wake at night with an ache in my shoulders, like the weight of the past pressing down. Other times, I'd be seized with a childish fury and impulse to find Daniel and break something of his. I never acted on those impulses. They passed like waves. Instead, I channeled them. I packed boxes, cleaned out drawers, assigned Lily a new drawer in her dresser. Small acts of reclaiming domestic territory. One late autumn afternoon, after months of court dates and small reconciliations with certain people, I walked into Lily's preschool to pick her up. A woman from the PTA approached me, eyes wet, and hugged me. "Thank you," she said, "for being brave." I didn't feel brave, that day only tired. But bravery is often quiet, and sometimes it is an accumulation of days, choosing the hard thing. The hug felt like a stitch in a slowly mending seam. There were also moments when I questioned everything. In the late quiet, I would read through old messages from Daniel Loving, notes written years before, and feel a grief for what we had been. Love, even at its worst, was craft. It takes skill to build. I mourned the losses, not only the husband who lied, but the man who once made me laugh, in ways that were real. I allowed myself to mourn without giving his betrayal authority over my entire life. Months later, at the final custody hearing, the judge looked at us both with the mixture of impatience and seriousness that only courts possess. Custody was granted to me with generous visitation to him under strict conditions. The judge's words were careful. "We prioritize the child's safety and emotional state above all." I left the courtroom with papers in hand that were more than documents. They were a redefinition of family. The story didn't end with a neat moral. People moved on, in the way communities do. Some relationships healed, some didn't. Daniel remarried eventually. From what whispers and social circles suggested, not that I cared to know details. I watched his life at a remove, curious and occasionally bitter, but mostly focused on mine. My daughter's laughter returned to a reliable frequency. Our home, once a stage for deceit, grew into a place where I set new rules and smaller, safer boundaries. Months after the party, on a Sunday morning, I made coffee and sat on the back steps watching Lily chase sunlight with a ribbon. The garden had recovered from the trampled chaos of that night. The string lights still hung, peaceful now. I felt an odd mix of exhaustion and a quiet, steady relief. The revenge I had plotted had not made me invulnerable. It had made me visible. That visibility was both a shield and a wound. I thought often about the moral rim of what I'd done. Would I do it again? Knowing what I know now, the ache, the collateral damage, the eventual quiet. My answer is complicated. Yes, because secrecy can erode the foundation of more lives than just yours. Sometimes people need a public ledger to hold them accountable. No, because public ruin is a savage thing and leaves scars not only on the guilty but also on the innocent who orbit them. In the end, the act of exposing the truth had been less an act of vindictiveness and more a reclamation of agency. For months before the party, I had felt fragmented, each secret a shard lodged under my skin. By naming those shards in public, by allowing the light into the corners he'd kept locked, I put my life back together in a new shape. It wasn't perfect. It was not even what I'd imagined as happily ever after, but it was mine. The final scene of that chapter played out quietly. Daniel stopped contacting me aggressively. He followed the legal terms. He showed up sometimes awkward, apologetic at school events, and sometimes he didn't. Lily learned to greet him at a distance and to come running back into my arms. She learned that people make mistakes and that sometimes the people we love are complicated. I taught her honesty, boundaries, and that her mother had the capacity to act when something was unfair. There is a peculiar, stubborn dignity in knowing you did what you could to protect your child, your self-worth, and your truth. The revenge had been a scalpel, yes, but also a signal flare. People saw what had happened. They learned something about the cost of betrayal. On an ordinary evening, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold, I wrote a short list of things I'd learned. Honesty is not just a virtue, sometimes it is an armor. Shame is a powerful silencer. Don't let it be the last thing you own. When someone takes away your control, find a way to reclaim it that harms the fewest possible innocents. If there is a final lesson I'll carry, it is this. Justice, when sought for the right reasons, is not vindictiveness. It is realigning the narrative so truth can stand where lies once stood. I had wanted my life back in some honest form, and in exposing him, I carved a path. The toll was real legal battles, social blinks of pity and scorn, a daughter learning complicated adult things too soon, but in the end, I had been true to myself. I did not become a new person overnight. The night of the party changed the course of my life, but it didn't erase years of history. What it did do was make my boundaries clear and protect my child from a future built on deceit. Revenge is not a spotless victory. It is messy, costly, and sometimes heartbreaking. But after months of quiet legal wrangling and the slow repair of relationships that mattered, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. A steady peace, not a triumphant shout, just a calm that comes when the fog lifts and you can see, once more, the road ahead. If you're listening and you've been lied to, remember this: you don't have to be silent to be strong. There are many ways to claim justice. Choose the path that keeps a clear conscience and protects those who depend on you. In my case, exposing the truth publicly was the right decision for me because secrecy would have allowed him to keep living unmoored from consequence. But every story is different. Be wise, be cautious, and above all, prioritize safety and your children's well-being. If this story hit you, if you felt that slow burn of betrayal or the cold swell of vindication, please like and subscribe. Share your thoughts or your own stories in the comments below. I read every message and learn from each one. If you want more tales about truth, revenge, and justice, served real messy, human stories, hit that bell so you don't miss the next one. Stay safe, keep your boundaries strong, and remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is make the truth impossible to ignore.